It all started small. Whispers in the corners, chuckles behind my back, and the raised eyebrows whenever I mentioned my dreams. It wasn't loud or obvious at first. It was more like a lingering cloud that hung in the background, casting a shadow over everything I wanted to become. I could feel the doubt like a heavy fog settling over every room I entered, a chill in the air that wasn't there before. At first, I thought I was imagining it. I would tell myself, maybe they didn't mean it like that, or maybe I'm just being sensitive. But there's a look people give when they don't believe in you. It's subtle, a flicker in their eyes, a twist of their lips. And once you notice it, you can't unsee it. Even the people closest to me, the ones who were supposed to lift me up, looked at me with that familiar look. The one that says, "You, really?" It's a look filled with pity and condescension, like they've already mapped out your future and decided it's not worth the effort you're putting in. I remember sitting across from a friend, someone I trusted, and telling them my plans. I was excited, almost breathless with the possibilities that lay ahead. I could see it all so clearly. The steps I needed to take, the sacrifices I was willing to make. But when I looked up, their face didn't match mine. Instead of excitement, I saw concern. Instead of support, I saw doubt. They leaned back, arms crossed, and said, "Are you sure this is the right path for you? Maybe you should have a backup plan. Just in case." A backup plan. That's what they always said, as if my dream was some fragile thing destined to shatter at the first sign of trouble. It was as if they had already decided my limits, drawing lines I had never agreed to. And the worst part was, I almost believed them. I almost let their doubt become my own. It's hard not to when it comes from the people you care about, the people whose opinions have always mattered. I started to shrink myself, trimming down my aspirations to fit into the box they thought I belonged in. But then there were the moments that hurt the most. The family dinners, the gatherings where everyone shared their accomplishments. I would speak about my goals, voice the things I was working on, and the room would go silent. The kind of silence that feels heavy, like it's pressing down on you. Then someone would laugh, a small dismissive laugh, and say, "Well, that's nice, but you should be more realistic." It wasn't just that they didn't believe in me. It was that they thought it was foolish for me to even try. It was like they were handing me a mirror, and for the first time, I saw their version of me. Small, incapable, and forgettable. The seed of doubt was planted that day, not just by their words, but by the look in their eyes. The look that said they had already decided my future. And it wasn't the one I envisioned for myself. They didn't know it, but every word, every slight, and every dismissive glance was watering that seed. It took root in me, deep down where my confidence used to be. For a while, I let it grow. I let their voices drown out my own, until I couldn't tell the difference between their doubts and my own fears. The funny thing about seeds, though, is that they don't always grow the way you expect. What they had planted wasn't a seed of defeat. It was a seed of defiance. And once it started to sprout, there was no going back. They never believed in me, but they had given me something more powerful than their belief. They had given me a reason to prove them wrong. Doubt has a funny way of shaping you. It can be like a heavy chain wrapped around your chest, weighing you down, making you second guess every decision. For a long time, that's exactly what it was for me. I started to play it safe. I started to settle for the things they said I should be happy with. I took the jobs that didn't challenge me, stuck to the paths that were familiar and easy. Every time I thought about stepping out of that comfort zone, I could hear their voices in my head, telling me it wasn't worth the risk. The worst part was, I almost convinced myself they were right. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every comment that chipped away at my confidence. I'd tell myself that maybe I was aiming too high, that maybe I should lower my expectations. I'd start to justify it, making excuses for why I wasn't chasing my dreams with the same fire I once had. It was like I was trying to convince myself that I didn't want it anymore, just to make the doubt hurt a little less. But something strange happened. The more I tried to smother that spark inside me, the more it fought back. It was like trying to hold back a wave with my bare hands. No matter how much I tried to convince myself to give up, there was a voice inside me that refused to be silenced. It whispered to me in the dark, reminding me of the fire I once had. It reminded me of the dreams I saw so clearly, the ones I used to be excited to talk about before their doubt started to seep in. Slowly, that whisper grew louder. It became a roar in my chest, a burning need to prove them wrong. It was like their doubt had backfired, turning into the very thing that fueled me. Every time someone told me I couldn't do something, I felt the fire inside me burn hotter. Every patronizing smile, every dismissive laugh, they were all like logs thrown onto the flames. I realized then that the doubt wasn't my enemy. It was my fuel. I decided that the only way to silence them was to make noise of my own, the kind of noise they couldn't ignore. I made a vow to myself that night. I would stop listening to their voices and start listening to mine. I would stop letting their disbelief shape me and let it drive me instead. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I just knew that I had to try. I knew it wouldn't be easy. When you're carrying the weight of everyone's doubt on your shoulders, every step feels like a battle. But I was done letting them hold me back. I was ready to start climbing, no matter how steep the path was. I began my climb, and it was harder than I had imagined. There were moments when the weight of their doubt felt like it was going to crush me. Moments when I stumbled and fell so hard I didn't think I'd ever get back up. It felt like I was alone on a mountain, struggling against a storm that was determined to knock me down. The higher I climbed, the stronger the winds blew, pushing me back, trying to force me to turn around and give up. I can't count how many times I thought about quitting. There were nights when I lay awake, exhausted and broken, wondering if they had been right all along. Maybe I wasn't cut out for this. Maybe I was just fooling myself, chasing after something that wasn't meant for me. But then I'd remember their faces, the way they looked at me with that mix of pity and disbelief. I'd remember their words, the ones that stung like salt in an open wound, and I'd feel the fire inside me blaze up again. I pushed myself harder than I ever had before. I worked through the nights, sacrificed my weekends, and kept going even when it felt like my body and mind were at their breaking point. Every small victory, every tiny step forward felt like a triumph. I was proving them wrong, one step at a time, and I could feel the shift. I could feel the power shifting from their doubt back to me. I realized something important along the way. The climb wasn't about reaching the top. It was about becoming strong enough to handle the journey. I wasn't just proving them wrong. I was proving something to myself, that I was stronger than I ever knew, stronger than their doubt could ever make me feel. I kept climbing, and I wasn't going to stop until I reached the top. It was slow at first, almost imperceptible. The small victories began to accumulate quietly, like drops in a bucket. At first, it was a single comment, a fleeting moment when someone who once doubted me hesitated before speaking. It was the slight change in the tone of their voice when they asked about what I was working on. They'd feign interest, but I could see it. The flicker of surprise when they realized I wasn't where they had expected me to be. They had put me in a box, sealed it tight, and left it on a shelf. But now the box was breaking open, and they didn't know what to make of it. I remember the day it truly shifted. I was at a gathering, one of those events where everyone parades their successes like trophies. It was the same scene as before, the same voices, the same faces. Except this time, it was different. I wasn't the one shrinking back, hiding behind small talk. I spoke about what I had been working on, the projects I had taken on, the things I had accomplished since they last saw me. I saw the look in their eyes change, the subtle widening as they processed my words. It was the first time I felt it, a crack in their certainty. The disbelief was still there, but it wasn't solid anymore. It was starting to fracture. It wasn't immediate though. Doubt is stubborn. It clings to people's minds like a barnacle on a ship, even as I pushed forward, as I made strides they couldn't ignore. They clung to their disbelief like it was a safety blanket. They needed to believe I couldn't make it, because if I could, then what did that say about them? It was easier for them to dismiss me than to confront their own limitations. I could see it in their eyes when they smiled, the tightness of their lips, the forced curve that didn't reach their eyes. They were trying to reconcile the image they had of me with the reality standing before them. Then came the turning point, a moment so small it might have gone unnoticed if I wasn't paying attention. It was during a conversation with someone who had always been vocal about my unrealistic goals. They had never hesitated to tell me to tone it down, to keep my feet on the ground. But this time, their tone was different. It was softer, almost hesitant. They asked me about my progress, but not with the same dismissive air as before. There was a hint of curiosity, a subtle acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, I was doing something they hadn't expected. The realization hit me then. They were starting to believe, not fully, not openly, but I could see the cracks forming in their doubt. It was like watching a dam under pressure, small leaks springing up everywhere, the water of truth pushing against the barriers they had built. I felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of me wanted to laugh, to throw their disbelief back in their faces and say, "See, I told you." But another part of me felt a quiet, profound sadness. I realized that their disbelief wasn't just about me. It was about themselves, their own fears, and the limits they had placed on their own lives. They had doubted me because they doubted themselves. They had given up on their own dreams a long time ago, and couldn't understand why I wouldn't do the same. They had settled into their comfort zones, wrapped themselves in the safety of mediocrity. And here I was, refusing to settle, refusing to shrink myself to fit it into their narrow expectations. My determination made them uncomfortable because it was a mirror they didn't want to look into. It reflected back all the things they had once wanted to be, but had convinced themselves they couldn't achieve. There was a bittersweet satisfaction in watching the shift. I didn't need their validation anymore. I'd found my own. But I couldn't help but notice the irony. They were starting to believe now, after the fact. Now that the evidence was in front of them, undeniable, they were changing their tune. I'd get messages from people I hadn't heard from in years, old acquaintances who had once dismissed me now reaching out with praise and congratulations. I always knew you had it in you, they'd say, and I'd smile because I knew the truth. They hadn't believed in me when it mattered, when I was struggling, when I was fighting tooth and nail just to get a foothold. Their belief now was meaningless to me. It wasn't built on faith or trust. It was built on proof. They believed in me now because I had forced them to see me. I had dragged my dreams out of the shadows, made them real and tangible, and held them up for the world to see. And only now, when they could no longer deny it, did they start to nod their heads and offer their support. It felt hollow, like applause at the end of a play where the audience hadn't paid attention to the story until the final act. I learned something valuable in those moments. I learned that the turning point wasn't about them. It was never about changing their minds. It was about me stepping into my own power, realizing that I didn't need their belief to validate my journey. I had spent so much time trying to prove something to them, but now I saw it clearly. The only person I needed to prove anything to was myself, and I did. Every step forward, every small victory, every time I rose after a fall. It wasn't to silence their voices anymore. It was to amplify my own. I realized that I had become someone they couldn't ignore, not because I wanted their attention, but because I had become too strong to be overlooked. I wasn't the underdog in their story anymore. I was the protagonist of my own. The turning point was subtle, almost anticlimactic. It wasn't marked by a grand moment or a dramatic confrontation. It was in the small shifts, the tiny changes in their behavior, the way they started to treat me differently without realizing it. It was the respect that slipped into their voices when they spoke to me, the way they listened now, instead of interrupting or dismissing my ideas. It was in the realization that their opinion of me no longer held any power. They could believe in me or not. It didn't matter. I had already proven everything I needed to prove. In the end, the victory wasn't in making them believe. The victory was in realizing that I didn't need them to. It was in the quiet confidence I found within myself, the unshakable knowledge that I had faced their doubt, their laughter, their disbelief, and I had risen anyway. I had climbed the mountain they said I could never scale, and I didn't do it for them. I did it for me, and that realization was the sweetest part of all. It was the moment I truly felt free. Now, I stand here, looking back on the path I've walked. The journey feels both distant and vivid, like a series of snapshots frozen in time. I see the younger version of myself, the one who felt small, who doubted every move, who let the voices of others drown out her own. I see the moments of uncertainty, the times when I was crushed under the weight of their disbelief. But the person I am now feels like a stranger to that past self. I've shed so many skins, broken so many molds, and risen from the ashes so many times that the doubt feels almost foreign now. It's a ghost that I remember, but it no longer haunts me. It's A strange feeling, this victory. I thought it would be louder, more triumphant. I imagined there'd be a moment of celebration, a point where I'd finally get to throw their disbelief back in their faces, where I'd get to say, "Look at me now." But as I reached the summit of this climb, I realized something important. I didn't need their applause. I didn't need their validation. The victory wasn't in their recognition. It was in the silence that followed. It was in the peaceful stillness I felt inside. The quiet knowledge that I had done it. Not for them, but for myself. The silence is the sweetest part. It's the sound of their voices fading into the background, becoming nothing more than distant echoes. It's the absence of their doubts and their laughter, replaced by the steady, calm rhythm of my own heartbeat. For so long I was driven by the need to prove them wrong, to make them eat their words. But now that I've arrived, now that I've become what they said I couldn't be, I find that I don't care about proving anything to them anymore. I don't need to rub it in their faces, because my success speaks for itself. The person I've become is the loudest, most undeniable statement I could ever make. I look around and see the same people living the same lives, speaking in the same tones. They've softened, sure. They've changed their tune, offering me praise and congratulations now, telling me how proud they are, how they always knew I'd make it. I smile and nod, but it feels like watching a movie I've seen too many times. I can predict their lines before they say them. It's a script they've rewritten, casting themselves as the supportive friends, the family who always believed in me. I don't hold it against them. I've realized that their words aren't really about me. They're about them, about their need to feel like they were on the right side of history. There's a quiet power in not needing to say anything, in letting the success speak on its own. I've learned that the greatest triumphs don't come with a roar. They come with a kind of serene, unshakable confidence. It's the way I carry myself now. The way I walk into a room and no longer feel the need to prove anything. I used to want to be seen, to be acknowledged. Now, I just want to live. I want to enjoy the life I've built, to revel in the peace I've found on the other side of the struggle. It's like standing on a mountaintop after a storm. The air is clearer, the sky is brighter, and everything feels sharper and more vibrant because I know what it took to get here. I often wonder if they truly see it, if they understand the depth of the transformation. They see the success, the external markers of achievement, the accolades and the milestones, but they don't see the scars, the sleepless nights, the tears that no one else saw. They don't see the moments when I was on the verge of giving up, when I was crumpled on the floor, broken and exhausted. They don't know how many times I had to drag myself up from the depths of my own despair, fighting against the tide of doubt that threatened to pull me under. And that's okay. They don't need to see it. I see it. I lived it. I survived it. And that's enough. There's a freedom in knowing that I owe them nothing. I don't owe them an explanation or a performance. I don't owe them gratitude for their belated support. I don't owe them the satisfaction of watching me bask in their approval. My success isn't theirs to claim or celebrate. It's mine. It belongs to the person I was when no one was watching. The version of me that kept going when it seemed like the whole world was against her. It belongs to the nights I stayed up late, working when everyone else was asleep. It belongs to the tears I wiped away in silence, the doubts I crushed underfoot as I took another step forward. I've learned that the real victory is internal. It's the peace I feel when I look in the mirror and see someone I'm proud of. Someone who fought for herself when no one else would. It's the strength I feel in my bones, the resilience that's become a part of who I am. It's the quiet satisfaction of knowing that I made it here, despite everything. That I built this life brick by brick with my own 2 hands. They never believed in me, but that's what makes this feeling so pure. Their disbelief was like a storm, and I was the tree that refused to be uprooted. Now the storm has passed, and I'm still standing stronger than ever. I've realized that the sweetest victories are the ones you share with yourself. It's the private moment when you close your eyes, take a deep breath and smile because you know what it took. You know what you overcame, and you know that it was worth it. It's the realization that you've become your own hero, that you were the person you needed all along. I don't need them to see me. I see myself, and that's all that matters. As I move forward, I carry the lessons with me, but I leave the bitterness behind. I've let go of the need for revenge, the desire to throw their words back at them. There's no point. I've outgrown the space they once occupied in my mind. I've made peace with the journey, embraced the struggle, and come out the other side transformed. I've become someone who doesn't need their belief, because I've built a belief in myself that is unbreakable. Now, I walk through life with a quiet confidence, a calm assurance that I've earned. It's not arrogance, it's peace. It's knowing that I am enough, that I've always been enough, even when they couldn't see it. It's the kind of victory that doesn't need to be shouted from the rooftops, because it's felt deep within. It's the kind of success that doesn't need applause, because it comes with its own sense of fulfillment. It's the victory in silence, the kind that lingers long after the noise has faded away. I've come to understand that the silence isn't empty. It's full of everything I've become. It's filled with the echoes of my resilience, the strength of my spirit, and the undeniable truth that I made it, despite it all. And that, more than anything, is enough.